to another episode of Deep True Crime. I'm Manny Rodriguez. In today's episode, as we know, Bryan Kohberger has been arrested as a suspect in the Idaho 4 homicides. And we continue to dive into why he did it, what did he do. We don't really even know a motive. But in this episode, I want to share with you some of the mistakes. It's obvious he didn't do this before. This was looking to be his first time, but in the process, he made some mistakes, even though he was as careful as possible. My friends, the whole focus of this channel is to keep you updated on what could go wrong in this crazy world we live in. And truth is, at the end of the day, we wish this never happens. But unfortunately, it continues to happen. Let's go ahead and dive into what we know at this time. As we know, Bryan Kohberger has been arrested in this national media attention-grabbing news. The 4 innocent young students who had so much life to live is said to have been slaughtered by this man, Bryan Kohberger. Right now, he's just a suspect. Police believe they have their guy. But what we don't know is what led to all of this, why he did it. But let's talk about what helped find the guy. The man that police say, this is our guy. Because here's the thing, he made some mistakes along the way, even though he studied hard at this. Because from what we are finding out as a criminology major, as a student, a PhD student, someone who is truly trying to understand this industry, it sounds like he was truly trying to understand being a criminal to avoid getting caught. That is what we are learning at this time. But there have been some mistakes along the way that Bryan has made that helped police catch up to him. We wanted justice for these 4 kids. He obviously thought he was avoiding the police. One of the big mistakes that he made was his cell phone records. After we got a hold of that arrest affidavit that was released on January 9th, we started learning so much more. January 3rd, something like that. Kohberger's many mistakes began way before his said incident, when he failed to turn off his cell phone while he was allegedly stalking the victims at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. As a result, data from his mobile records suggests that he visited that crime scene at least 12 different times before November 13th, 2022. And the affidavit, it explains that all of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days. And this is where it's like, obviously, if they have that proof from his cell phone records, he had to be stalking them. He had to be checking on them. He had to be keeping tabs on the victims. He had to be surveilling them. It's almost like he was keeping his own surveillance on them, looking for the perfect time. Because now we know all this digital footprint truly looks like this was a planned incident, which is why he is charged with 4 first degree charges. Okay, not second degree, not third degree, first degree. And so the number of times that Kohberger is said to have been casing the would-be crime scene is also helpful information for anyone who's following this, right? If he is someone who's been studying crime, he probably was already looking into this action, into how to surveil someone. But as we know, his car was seen in the area multiple times, as said in the affidavit. And so he was probably trying to visualize his perfect entry, his perfect exit, the fastest way to get in, get out. And that's one of the reasons why I think he did not go after the two roommates. He ran out of time. Things were not going as smooth as he thought. That was one of his mistakes, were those cell phone records. I'm glad he made the mistakes, but I want you to know, what did he do? Because you like diving into true crime deeply, right? Just like I do. And so I'm sharing with you what we are learning and what are some of the mistakes that Bryan Kohberger did that led to his arrest. Because another thing that he did is alleged to have done, even though he was doing everything he can not to get caught, he was planning this thing out allegedly for weeks before this. His arrest records claim that he left an important piece of evidence behind for the investigators. Not on purpose. Not on purpose, it does not look like. And so he is said to have left behind a tan leather knife sheath. He has said to have left it at the crime scene where police discovered it near Maddie's body. And so we don't really know what that led to, right? But I tell you what, Kaylee Goncalves' family, she says that she hoped that her daughter snatched the knife sheath on which suspect Bryan Kohberger's DNA was found. So she's saying that she hopes that she snatched it from him. Maybe he didn't know. And so Kaylee Goncalves' parents, they say they take some comfort in the hope that their daughter's will to fight her killer was possibly what helped lead police to a suspect. I would appreciate that, because that sheath that fits a K-bar knife is believed to be used in this brutal slaying, and it was found beside both of their bodies. And that's according to the affidavit that was released last week. And so DNA that was found on the button of the sheath linked Bryan to the crime scene, and he was arrested after more than a month following this incident, which is why it is said that this is definitely tying to him. It doesn't look good for him, right? And so we hope that he did struggle. I hope that they helped solve this themselves, right? I'm watching this show on Hulu, I believe it is called How I Caught My Killer. I hope this is a way that these kids helped catch him. And so he did all the planning he could around this, right? But he is said to have left this tan leather knife sheath at the scene. And so to me, that is definitely an amateur mistake. Is that not a fair statement? And so what we don't know is, did he take it out of the sheath and then use it? Or was it on his belt and it was pulled off? We don't really know. We don't know. But my guess is that he probably got worried and all that stuff. Because again, it looked like he might have been running out of time. He probably thought this was going to be simple, smooth, in, out. Because according to what we're finding out, this guy tried to literally study the I don't even know what you would call the true crime genre, maybe. He literally tried to follow and study even former serial kills. You know what I mean? And so the Idaho State Lab, it identified male DNA on the sheath's button clasp, which was later linked to Kohberger after they retrieved genetic material from the trash outside his family's home. He threw trash away in the neighbor's home at 4 a.m. If that does not scream a red flag, why in the blue moon would you be doing that, right? And so let's think about that. there must be additional DNA evidence elsewhere as well. Because the way that these 4 kids were done the way they did, there has to be more. There has to. They're not done linking Bryan to this crime. They just had enough to get him arrested. They had a strong case to at least get an arrest warrant on him. But again, as soon as the arrest was done, now phase 2 began. Now they got a suspect. Now they have to make it a airtight case against him. And so the way these 4 kids were done, there has to be other DNA around that home. As the coroner said, as police have been said to have said, this was the bloodiest crime scene they've ever seen. The unthinkable occurred at that home. And it's as tragic as can possibly be. But leaving this knife sheath behind is a huge mistake on Bryan's part. We are grateful because we want the right person to pay for this. The last thing we want is someone getting away with any crimes, let alone something like this. But another mistake that he made was the way they were able to track his movements. You see, while initial reports indicated that the stabbings occurred around 3 a.m. in the morning, authorities, they're saying that Goncalves, Mogen, Kernodle, and Chapin were killed between 4 and 4:30 a.m. Remember, for the longest time, they were looking for anything around 3 and 4 a.m. But it looks like, which is probably leading up to it, which makes sense, but they didn't really request much after 4:30. It was like any video you have from between 3 and 4. And so 2 other housemates, Dylan and Bethany, they were in the first floor. Not when the crime occurred. One of them were in the first floor. The other, Dylan, was in the second floor when that occurred, because she is said to have actually laid eyes on this dark-clad, bushy-eyed man, right? And so these 2 girls, they were left unharmed, and police noted in the affidavit that Mortensen saw an unknown male leaving the house around 4:17. And so that's how they were able to begin tracking him even a little better. But see, cell data indicates that Kohberger turned his phone off during the murder's time frame. But records show that his phone did ping in Pullman, Washington, where he lived, where he was also studying at Washington State University, living in the off-campus apartment, but it was a Washington State University apartment complex for students. And so he was seen there around 2:47 a.m. Then his phone went silent for 2 hours and 1 minute. Just 18 minutes after police believed that the incident took place. Kohberger's phone placed him on the highway just south of Moscow just before 5 a.m. heading west back to Pullman, Washington. And he was pinged going north toward his apartment around 5:30. Now, he was doing everything he can to evade detection, literally. But he forgot about what cell phone records can literally do. If you carry that phone with you, you are almost being tracked. You can turn it off. I believe that helps the non-tracking part. But he made the mistake of also still being tracked on his way to the crime scene and leaving the crime scene. Literally. And so the FBI analysts are obviously going to go through these cell phone data with a fine comb and find everything they can. And so, that's an obvious thing, right? They're going to look at these cell phone records because that is one of the most damaging piece of evidence against a suspect. Literally. So, even though he was tracking, maybe he was following BTK because he was learning under a professor who did a book. Maybe he was tracking other serial cases, but he made a big mistake by being able to be tracked on when he turned his phone off and when he turned it back on. You see? So, that is interesting on its own. He forgot about that little part, is my guess. He probably thought, well, I'm here now. I'm heading that way. Let me turn off the phone. I'm done. I'm almost home. Let me turn it back on. Well, that still can catch up to you. Again, right now, this is all just probable cause, right? We don't really know every single thing. There's going to continue to be more evidence that comes out. But another mistake that he is said to have done is, what did he do the next day, right? Or should I say, not even the next day. Yes, the next day, but also literally the day of. In particularly, which is so mind-blowing, cell phone records also show that Kohberger left his phone on when he left his Pullman apartment again around 9 a.m. November 13th and traveled back to Moscow. Shortly thereafter, between 9:12 and 9:21, his device pinged in the area of the King Road house. And then he has a pit stop in the neighborhood, which comes hours before the surviving housemates called 911 and the public was alerted to the grisly crime. And so authorities, they now believe that Kohberger did return to the crime scene to admire what he had done. That's what they are alleging. But we know that it's extremely mind-blowing because he also is alleged to have come back to the crime scene on November 14th, where a white car, oh my gosh, it is so similar to it, even though it's a little hard to see in the trees, but you can really identify with what we've been following when it comes to the car, right? The Hyundai Elantra. And so we've literally been talking about this car, and then here he is seen there. If that is him, I would think cell phone records can also tie him to that unless he turned off his phone. But this guy looked like he was strolling through there to see what's going on multiple times. Speaking of the white car, that was another mistake that Bryan Kohberger had made, allegedly, right? You see, after this car was reportedly seen, and then there was, APBs put out on this car, like everyone, be on the lookout for this car, be on the lookout for this car. If you know anyone who could be driving a car like this in the area around that time, or you know someone who's been having their car sit inside a garage, maybe you didn't know that someone took the car without your permission, they were asking for all types of help. They were doing everything they can to get eyeballs on any Hyundai Elantra. Now, granted, they did share the wrong year. Maybe that was on purpose. Maybe it wasn't. We don't know. But one of the earliest clues in this investigation was surveillance footage of a white Hyundai Elantra circling the King Road neighborhood beginning around 3:29 a.m. And so the arrest affidavit details how this car made a fourth circle through the area around 4:04 a.m. 4:04 a.m. in the morning before leaving the neighborhood at a high rate of speed around 4:20 a.m. Now remember, Dylan says that he left around 4:17, and so this would definitely add up if that's his car and all the pinging is adding up, right? And so this would suggest that he may have risked parking at the scene of the crime. Because both Moscow and Pullman are highly monitored college towns, because it's a college town, authorities in Idaho were quickly able to match a vehicle similar to his that was captured by Washington State University cameras heading toward Moscow about an hour before the incident. And this same Elantra was then seen returning the Pullman area around 5:25 a.m. The MPD, Moscow Police Department, they asked other authorities to be on the lookout for the car on November 25th. Within days, a pair of Washington State University officers, they flagged the model registered to Kohberger, thus placing the Pennsylvania native at the center of this investigation. That's when they felt like, okay, we might be onto something. Let's start trailing and monitoring him and find anything that we can tie to DNA or whatever, because they identify the car. And that's when it is said to help lead to Bryan Kohberger. They were able to find out who owns the car. They were able to tie it back to Pennsylvania. And so obviously this wasn't a good move. He still had this car, right? He used his own car to be in there. So again, I'm glad he made these mistakes. But another mistake he made was not getting rid of this car. He literally held on to this car. Is that why he wanted to drive back to Pennsylvania to get it back home and hide this thing, get rid of it, sell it? Who knows? I don't know. But even after this Elantra emerged as a main point in the investigation, as one of the biggest leads that they gave the public when they're looking all over for this white Hyundai Elantra, Kohberger, he failed to get rid of this car. He used this car to drive across the country with his father, Michael Kohberger Jr., in December for the holidays. And so his dad flies into Washington Airport in order to drive back. And it sounds like they already had this in the works as a family trip, as something to do as a father-son thing. And the dad is even said to have been bragging to a mechanic when they had this car looked at that, hey, I just drove back with my son from Idaho/Washington. And so he was proud of it. I truly believe that dad has nothing in the world to do with this, did not know, and is now in horror over what his son has done. He probably cannot believe that his son is capable of this, so they're taking his side. And so during the journey, the pair was pulled over twice within a short period of time in Indiana. And so we don't really know. There was an article that said the FBI ordered the stops, and then another article that said FBI denied ordering the stops. So we don't really know, but my gosh, to be pulled over 2 times in was it 9 minutes apart? That's what many people are saying, 9 minutes apart that they were pulled over. That would be way too coincidental and way too odd. So to me, I do believe that they were trying to get a better look inside to see if his hands had any scratch, if he had any scratch. If they were like, hey, let's make sure that the right person's in the car before we continue to track. Who really knows? But if they were already on him November 25th and he leaves a week or so or 2, whatever later, they were going to follow this dude across country. They're going to be tracking him across country. And so, I would think they need a good reason to pull him over. So they said, hey, you were following too close to that van. He probably don't even know what, okay, all right, I don't know what you're talking about, but all right, whatever. Playing dumb. Personally, when I'm watching the video, I think he remained calm with his interaction with the police. Dad, I think, he sounded a little frustrated the second time, like, why the heck are you pulling us over twice? He didn't say that. But I think there is something to be said about that, right? And so we do know that there are some self-defense wounds from a couple of the kids is what we are finding out. Again, we can only take it with a grain of salt, right? But if there were some defensive wounds, that would mean that he should have some type of wounds on himself. Is that not a fair statement? I would think, but another mistake that he could have made, again, take it with a grain of salt. A lot of people are talking about this, and I've talked about the ex-FBI agent Jennifer Koffendorfer, who has been on the news quite a bit because she's an ex-FBI agent. And so in the days after Kohberger's arrest, the ex-FBI agent Jennifer Koffendorfer, she tweeted that she believed that the suspect had commented on some interesting things. Making some creepy comments about things related to the case. And so she says that she believed that the suspect had commented under an alias named Papa Roger. And if you've been following this case, a lot of people started talking about this. I'm sharing it because Jennifer Kofendorfer, I do believe she is doing it in the best of interest. She's only going to share what seems to be really viable. You know, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be Nancy Grace always takes a lot of heat for, I don't even know why. Media has a job to do. Media, right? I'm in the media now. My goal is to keep you updated on what could go wrong. So at the end of the day, look at this. Should you really not pay attention when there are some red flags around? Kofendorfer, she posted a screenshot of one particular post that was shared by an unknown user, Papa Roger, right? Papa Roger, in the University of Idaho murder case discussion of the evidence released, the murder weapon has been consistent as a large fixed blade knife. This leads me to believe they found the sheath. This evidence was released prior to autopsies. That right there, because that was done before he was captured, that was a very odd thing. Literally. Right? And so obviously Jennifer Kofendorfer, in her tweet, she said, I have followed Papa Roger comments with intrigue. This comment was of particular interest after the release of the PCA. The comments just seemed to hit home. A lot of people made that comment. Literally, a lot of people dug deeper into this guy and did bring up stuff that, how would he have known this? Which is why I'm sharing this part, because a lot of it does add up. And so, in light of the news that authorities did find this sheath at the King Roadhouse, Kofendorfer said that this just seemed to hit home in a mysterious way, right? It's just a little odd. But others argued that why would he risk leaving a public digital trail? And Kofendorfer referenced his aforementioned mistakes, including using his own vehicle when traveling to and from the scene, which is what I just hit on, right? And so this group, this case discussion group, an admin for this group actually backed up Jennifer Kofendorfer's claim, remembering that Papa Roger was argumentative and said some really creepy stuff that caused them to be removed from the group the night before his arrest. No one has heard from Papa Roger since the arrest, right? And so that's what the moderator had noted. No, he just went silent. And so I think there is some credibility to that, right? And so let's be real, it wouldn't be the first time that someone's done that. Is that not a fair statement? And so you also have to say that considering this affidavit, I think everything looks they did a great job in making sure that they have the right guy. Again, he gets his day in court. We haven't heard anything from him. We've only heard what the police have on him. I'm sharing with you some of the mistakes that led to his arrest. Also sharing, what do they have on him, right? Diving deep in true crime. Isn't that the name of our channel? Deep True Crime. My friends, at the end of the day, this is not about me. This is about being a voice for the victims. This is about keeping you updated on what could go wrong in this crazy world we live in. At the end of the day, we don't really know why people do these things. We do know in ourselves that, hey, control it. There's those angers. All of us has that anger, that boiling point. Right? Look at the road rage out there. I'm afraid to even honk. My horn on my car doesn't work. I'm kind of glad because I don't want to really honk at people. But sometimes honking can prevent accidents. When I use my wife's car, I could remember a time where it's like, but if I'm sitting at the stoplight and someone's in front of me and it hasn't turned, I'm not going to honk. The thing is so loud it upsets people. Now, granted, if you're there way too long, I'm going to honk a little bit, like try to give you a little soft nudge, right? Gotta be careful with the people you come across in this world, my friends. Be careful. At the end of the day, this is not about me. And if this is the type of content you like to follow, hit that subscribe button, click on that like, and hit that notification bell if you want to be updated whenever I share any content. I'm Manny Rodriguez. My friends, thank you for joining me on another episode of Deep True Crime. Until next time, my friends, peace.